So now I can do karaoke, right? All right. So no one here, I mean, gosh, after listening to us go on and on about this today, no one here is unaware of the health crisis that America and many other countries are currently facing. The rapid rise in the incidence of diabetes, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, all of the conditions that Dr. Westman talked about, Alzheimer's disease, as Amy filled us in on. We're dealing with this as a global issue. But this is just recent. I mean, you saw my slide that I got hip checked out of grad school for. This has only happened in the past few decades. So we think one way to turn the tide on some of these diseases, and like Amy, we can't make claims about prevention here, but we know that something that we were doing in the past was working okay, and something that we're doing now isn't. And we think that one way to turn the tide is by going back, rediscovering an old way of eating that we call vintage eating. Now, vintage eating is not going to help you lose 50 pounds in 5 minutes for your high school class reunion. And as a person trained in epidemiology, I'm not going to make cause-effect claims for it. Our diet may not prevent this or that or the other and cure toe fungus, but there are a lot of benefits to going back to eating the way that we did just a few generations ago. You don't have to go back thousands of years to an ancestral diet. You can just think about the way, depending on your age, your grandmother or your great-grandmother ate, and go back to that way of eating. That's what we're calling vintage eating. So when we wrote this book, our dinner plans book, we wanted to create a book that was going to make going back to this new old-fashioned way of eating easy, to give people the confidence that anyone could do this. And I'm here to tell you, Jenni likes to cook. I really don't. When I went back to grad school, I told my husband, the kitchen is all yours now. I'm not going in there anymore. But so if I can write a meal planning book that makes cooking appealing to me, anybody can do this. And the other thing that we wanted to do is help make a low-carb plate look normal. Now, you saw the plate that I put up there before with the colored quadrants of food. Nobody eats like that anyway. We wanted to show plates that look like stuff that we actually eat and that look normal. So, what do we mean by vintage eating? It means going back to eating real food. And that's a tricky word, real food. I always say, what are we eating before? Surreal food, right? Imaginary food? No. What we were eating, as I showed you before, is mostly animals. We're eating animal products. So you've seen this slide before. We were eating meat, eggs, cheese, cream, ice cream. They even threw that in there for us. And fats and oils. That was the majority of our diet. And there were some carbs in there. And there were fruit in that diet before. But what there wasn't is a whole lot of those products that I showed you earlier. Light, fat-free, cholesterol-free. There weren't all these products. There was some processed food, sure, but most of the food was real food. And what do we mean by real food? We mean food that is whole. It hasn't been processed and then dehydrated and then processed some more. It's foods that are processed either very lightly or traditionally processed. Something you could do in your kitchen, like making cheese, which you can actually totally do in your kitchen, but why would you? Foods that are nutrient dense naturally. Have you ever looked at a box of cereal? Everything that's good for you in a box of cereal has been put there. It's been sprayed on. It's like a tan. In order to make cereal worth eating, they have to enrich it and fortify it. You don't have to enrich or fortify real food like eggs or meat. And foods that haven't had their natural fats removed and replaced with some of those fancy schmancy things that we invented in food science in the 1970s, like corn syrup and corn oil. Egg beaters are nothing but an egg with the good stuff taken out and the stupid stuff put in. So real food are meat, eggs, cheese, nuts, vegetables, tart fruit, which sounds like a great band name, tart fruit, sweet fruit and root vegetables. These are for maybe growing kids or people who are growing kids or those who just tolerate carbs better than others. And cooked grains, for some people that's always going to be a no-no. If you're gluten sensitive, if you're very carbohydrate sensitive, but some folks can tolerate some grains. And if you're athletic, if you're a growing kid or if you're growing kids, then maybe you can tolerate these a little bit more. But you don't need them, but how easy is it? Here's your grocery list. Like, this could be it. This is all you need to go in the grocery store with. But we're here to answer the question, how do I take all this stuff and make a meal? Well, it's like the Jackson 5 said.
ABC. She tried to get me to sing today. So ABC is easy as 1, 2, 3. So this is our ABC plate that we included in our book. Yeah, it's pretty simple. You divide your plate into 3 sections. The first and most important part of your plate, adequate protein. That's the A. B stands for brightly colored veggies. Is carefully chosen carbs. And that might be almost no carbs if you need to be extra careful. Or did I do something wrong? Okay, here we're back. So a vintage dinner plate can look something like this, right? A grilled steak, salad, maybe iceberg wedges in this case, and some sauteed mushrooms. This looks like something you could get at a steakhouse. And it's not that hard to make. None of those things take more than 20 minutes, right? Now, maybe you don't feel like cooking at all.
I never feel like cooking at all.
I know, sometimes I don't feel like cooking either, truth be told. So maybe you make your plate, you pick up some chicken salad at the deli, and then you fish some celery out from, I know you have some in there, put some cream cheese on it, and slice up an avocado. And that could be a nice sort of picnic-ish dinner. So it doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be dramatic. And it may not even need a recipe, right? You can just do this without even looking at a book. So what we did with our book is we tried to make it easy to mix up all the ideas of what could be. So let me show you. So we have on our website, you don't need our book, you can just go to our website, this tool, and there are 30 adequate protein pieces of the plate, 30 bright veggies, and 30 careful carbs. And about half the and the other half are actually for a more liberal diet. So anyway, you can mix and match with our book. You can mix and match on our site by clicking those arrows you see on the sides. And when you see a plate of food that suits you, you can just click on the picture and get a simple recipe for how to make that food.
In our book, we use the term recipe loosely.
Yeah.
Very.
It's like it's like how you would describe to a girlfriend if she had your roasted carrots and she called you, like what you would say to.
I dumped them in a pot.
Yeah.
And then I tossed them all away. Then I shoved them in the oven.
Right.
And got them out later.
Gently place them in the. Anyway, so the principles of vintage eating are so easy. You can do this yourself. And we're just going to go over each part of the plate just to kind of set it in your brain. So starting with A is for adequate protein. There are actually 3 essential nutrients, And one of them is the amino acids found in protein. The other would be the fatty acids found in fats, and then there's some micronutrients found in a lot of different foods, like vitamins and minerals. So of these, the protein's the most important. Dr. Westman said this thing you're getting. And so the question becomes, well, okay, how much protein do I need? A little tricky because the protein needs can change depending on how big you are and how active you are, or even if you're sick, you might need protein. But a good way to get started is to think about 100 grams of protein per day, and plus or minus 20 grams depending on your size. So if you're a big, tall person, 120. If you're more like me, 80 probably. And then it's nice to eat it at every meal. So divide it up over 3 meals of a day. So 30 grams in a given day, or in a given meal, 3 times a day. Obviously, if you're only eating twice a day, maybe you're experimenting with missing breakfast, for example. If you're trying that, then you'd need to get more, maybe 50 grams in each of your 2 meals. But going back to the 30-gram example, 4 ounces of meat, 4 ounces of cheese, 3 or 4 eggs, 4 ounces of fish. Those are all about 30 grams of high-quality protein, and that's a great place to start. So next we move on to the B section again, bright veggies. And bright veggies are not smart vegetables. They are brightly colored vegetables, as Adele writes here. So look for the bright colors, often bright green, because sometimes actually the bright orange ones end up in the careful carb category. But you can see the kinds of things we're talking about here: asparagus, cabbage, broccoli, green beans. And, you know, everyone says you should eat your veggies. Your grandmother says it. Your mom probably told you that. And we think that except for the very few people who have sensitivities or allergies, veggies are just these really positive little packets of flavor and fiber and vitamins. But what if you don't like veggies? Or if maybe one of those kids in your house doesn't like them? I would challenge you to try to change either your own or the other person's mind about that by cooking them with fat and salt. I think part of the low-fat craze made broccoli pretty miserable because steamed broccoli is not actually that delicious. But when you put some salt and butter on it, it can be really amazing. So the other thing about adding fat to your veggies, and I think this point gets a little missed in our kind of diet culture, is that we actually need calories, and a lot of veggies don't have very many calories. So if you're eating a salad and you haven't put dressing on it, you're going to be really hungry, and you're going to grab the banana nut muffin, at 3:30. So I think adding a nice healthy fat like olive oil or butter to your veggies is not only makes it taste better, but it makes it more of a meal. Also, fat on veggies allows your body to do a better job of absorbing the fat-soluble vitamins in your veggies. And, what's the point of eating your veggies if you're not going to get those vitamins? So we really like fat with our veggies. The last item on your plate is careful carbs. And in our book and on our website, about half of these are really careful, like keto-friendly carb. And the example in this picture of that would be either the cauliflower or the sauteed mushrooms. But there are also people who can enjoy carbier carbs. And there's potatoes and sweet potatoes and parsnips and things like that. Now, if you live in a family with people eating at different carb levels, it can be really nice to make one of these yummy carbier vegetables and you just have a tiny bite, or you make something else for yourself, but you keep the the family happy, so to speak, by giving them a potato every once in a while. I think that is really a good idea. So we do not, this book is kind of grain-free except for the corn, because corn kind of masquerades as a veggie. But, we didn't include any grains or other common starches in our C section. They're all vegetables. So fortunately, you don't have to stop at the C, because Adele, unlike the Jackson 5, is going to take it even a little farther.
Yes. So we're going to do some more letters, but don't worry, folks. We're not going to go through all 26. All right. So D, like Vanna, D is for drink water. Now, you hear lots of rules around drinking water, and 6 to 8 glasses, 8 ounces, blah, 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 blah. Water doesn't have any magical properties, unless, of course, you consider keeping yourself alive a magical property, because you do need water to live just like you need calories. But we really do like water, not so much for what it is, but what it's not, which is sugar water or pineapple water, right? So nearly everything else that we drink, except maybe tequila, is water with sugar in it. So fruit juice is, right. Sports drink, soda, mango, chai, latte, frappuccino, cappuccino, water with sugar in it. That's right. It's all water with sugar in it. And speaking of tequila, because we were speaking of tequila, weren't we? We were. Many of our favorite adult beverages are also loaded with sugar. So even if you choose low sugar options, if you have difficulties controlling your blood sugars, alcohol can really send you for a ride on the blood sugar roller coaster. So to minimize those impacts, first, choose spirits with no added sugary stuff. So dry wine, ultralight beer, and I'm going to get this wrong, alcoholic spritzers? Hard seltzers. Yeah. But even then, you need to choose wisely, and you need to know your limits. And if you have a metabolic condition that you need to keep track of, so know how alcohol affects that. But best of all, E is for easy. One of the best kept secrets about minimizing the carbohydrates in your diet and not being afraid of fat is how easy it makes planning, shopping, and cooking. So it's a meat and 2 veggies, right? That's all you have to think about. When you go to the grocery store, you actually don't even need a list. You go through the vegetable section and you get some. You go through the meat section and you get some. You go home and you can use our little book or our little online tool and flip through and see what the combination is that you want. And we'll give you some ideas, or you can wing it on your own. I mean, it's really easy. Grab a protein, grab a vegetable, heat, season, throw in a little healthy fat, olive oil, butter, coconut oil, season it, maybe a little dry wine, salt and pepper, get fancy with some crazy Cajun spice mix, but there's nothing to really think about. So this is how easy it is to do it. My husband, who's taken over the cooking, he likes our cookbook because he doesn't have to think about recipes and shopping lists. He makes it that easy. So you don't have to buy special health foods. You don't have to use fancy French cooking methods. Everything is either quick, like pan frying, or easy, like roasting. And now F is for finally done, right? No, not that easy. F is for fat. We've talked a lot about how the history of fat became demonized, and how having fat as part of your diet is not dangerous, as Eric made clear. It's not dangerous to have that as part of your diet. And as Jenni has told us, the science on this is changing and the headlines are changing. And as Amy has told us, fat can actually be your friend if you're trying to reduce or to prevent cognitive impairment. But fat is our friend for many, many reasons. Makes our food taste good. It makes it easy to cook. If you're shopping on a budget, Lean cuts of meat are more expensive. Fatty cuts of meat are less expensive. And you know what? It's much easier to dry out a lean pork tenderloin than it is to dry out a fattier pork chop. So it gives you a little more leeway. If you're not an experienced cook and you choose fattier cuts of meat, you're less likely to make them turn into shoe leather when you try to cook them. So let's see what else I need to say here about fat. Amy talked about this a little bit. Every cell in your body is made up of fat. It's the lipid bilayer. It's really important to have fat in your diet, and it's important to have all kinds of fat. So we all know how saturated fats got bad-mouthed, but you need saturated fats. You also need monounsaturated fats and polyunsaturated fats. Your cells in your bodies need all those kinds of fats. What kind of food will give you all of those kinds of fats in one package? Whole foods, like meat, like eggs, like cheese. Whole foods come with whole fats. You know how they make a big deal about whole grains because it's got the bran, it's got the germ. Think about fats the same way. Whole fats are our whole grains, and you get them from real food. And they give you the whole package so that your body can take what it needs for its lipid bilayers in every cell in your body. So there's no evidence that whole fats, which come with whole foods, are dangerous to your health. On the other hand, there is evidence that replacing dietary fat with dietary carbohydrate is harmful. Trying to avoid fat hasn't helped us to avoid a plague of chronic diseases that no one worried about 50 years ago. And not being afraid of fat makes your life easier.
All right, that's the end of the letters. But I want to talk about some special situations. So, life goes on, right? And just because you've started a low carb or ketogenic diet doesn't mean you're never going to leave your house. And so I'm going to talk about traveling and dining out a little bit in terms of just some planning you might or might not need to do. Now, this graphic from Diet Doctor's site is kind of like they're having a little fun with it. I don't know if you can see, but the butter's in a soap dish, like a travel soap dish, and the bacon's in a travel toothbrush case. So you don't have to do that. You don't have to rush out and buy containers. A Ziploc bag usually does the trick. And so if you're going to be traveling and you're concerned that you might find yourself in a situation where you're not going to be able to find a food that you like that is also healthy for you, definitely go ahead and, if you love bacon, put some bacon in your bag and enjoy it when you're hungry. Personally, I like to keep this really simple. I go with macadamia nuts. I think they're delicious. They have macros that appeal to me. They are super satisfying, really dense energy, so they don't take up very much room. And a handful is like lunch, right? The problem with macadamia nuts is that I like them a little too much, and sometimes salty nuts can be that way for people. So I try not to eat them every day, but they're great to have for emergencies when traveling. Sometimes when you're traveling, you're just trying to delay a meal a couple of hours. And if you have something in your bag, maybe it's even an Adapt bar, right, Dr. Westman? If you have something in your bag that's healthy for you, that's really helpful. But if you forget, almost everywhere you can buy coffee or tea and put some cream in it. So there are other pretty ubiquitous ways to get something to eat on the road. I also think some people like to pack a lot of food. I am more of the opinion that you can go into a grocery store almost anywhere and buy cheese and deli meats or nuts or, even if you like pork rinds or whatever it is that you like. There's a lot of things that are in almost every grocery store, even the corner, country store. So that's really what I recommend. I think you want to keep things as easy as possible. And sure, planning is great, but sometimes it's nice to not have to plan. And as you get used to eating this way, I think you'll find that you have to do less and less planning for things like travel. Now, a couple words about eating out. Again, I think this is something that can be a little intimidating when you first start, but after you've done it for a while, it becomes second nature. The most common strategy for those who are not vegetarians is just to order a piece of meat or fish and then ask that the starch be left off the plate and replaced with like double veggies or a salad or something. And I find this works really well at almost any restaurant. I definitely, if I'm really hungry, I might ask for a little butter to melt on my veggies. I'm not a huge advocate of eating gobs of butter just because it's allowed. But sometimes if you're in a restaurant and you're not eating the starch, you just need a few more calories. And sometimes you'll get steamed broccoli that doesn't have that many. So sometimes butter can be helpful. I think dressings and sauces are a place that can get people into trouble. Some people even carry around some olive oil in their purse or bag so they can use that and not have to risk the dressing being too sugary, or if they're avoiding the industrial seed oils. Almost every dressing you would get at a restaurant would have that. You can also ask for olive oil and vinegar at a restaurant too. In terms of drinks, it's kind of like what Adele said, right? Like tea, coffee, decaf, water, seltzer, dry alcohol, dry wine, a shot of tequila, whatever it is that isn't going to have a lot of sugar in it is great. And for dessert, honestly, I know it's very European, but a cheese course can be wonderful. And getting some raspberries with some whipping cream poured on top can also be a great way to end your meal if you just don't want to be the only one not sitting there with something delicious in front of you. Now, in terms of these sort of practical tips, there's a lot of information on many websites, including Diet Doctor, about how to live your life and keep it easy and real with low carb. So not only traveling and dining out, but there's a guide, maybe ghost written by Adele, I'm not sure, about how to eat low carb without cooking. There's one, how to eat low carb on a budget, which is really popular. It's one of the most popular concerns I know on the Diet Doctor Facebook group. And then I actually wrote a guide on the site called Living Low Carb in a High Carb World. So if you're in kind of like a mixed marriage where you might have someone who wants cookies in the house even though you don't, there's some tips in there about how to keep it a little bit easier, how to keep the temptation a little bit farther away from you and such. There's also a guide about cheating, which Adele is going to talk about.
And I don't like to call it cheating because cheating means it's a game or a contest. But so it's not really cheating. It's called life. You're on your ketogenic or low carb diet. You're losing weight. You're getting your blood sugars under control. You're feeling better. That achiness in your knees is going away. But you never know what life is going to throw your way, and sometimes what life throws your way is a birthday cake. So you have to deal. So what are you going to do? There are plenty of people out there in the world with lots of willpower that they can look at a piece of cake and a donut and just say no. And I admire those people, but I don't happen to be one of them. And there are people with serious metabolic conditions that can't cheat. They can't play around because it means an upset in their medication and they're really going to feel terrible and it's really not worth it. But if your favorite aunt bakes you a rhubarb pie that has always been your favorite since you were a little kid, and she puts it down in front of you and you can't say no, well, what are you going to do? Yeah, I'm going to eat that. And then do I just go, oh, well, there goes my keto diet. I'm done. Bring on the French fries. No. Our advice to you when you fall off the horse is to get right back on it. And you know, this is one of the lessons I've learned from Dr. Unwin, who's practicing over in the UK. And if you haven't run into him, Google him and look up his stuff. He says with his patients, sometimes they start a keto diet or a low-carb diet twice or 3 times or 4 times. But they get back on that horse. The next meal that you eat after your favorite aunt's rhubarb pie should go A, adequate protein, B, bright veggies, and well, depending on how guilty you feel, C, careful carbs. You can do it. You just get right back on that horse as many times as you need to be successful on the journey that you're on. So I think that's it for us. Yeah? So let me say what to visit. Yes, so if you haven't figured this out already, you can visit us on eatthebutter.org. That's where all the fancy tools and news stuff that Jenni puts together, and it's really a fun site, and we're really, really proud of it. And it means you don't have to buy our book. How about that for a book author standing up there going, you really don't have to buy our book. It's on the site. Also visit both of us at Diet Doctor. As Jenni said, there's lots and lots of helpful resources for both doctors and patients on that site. And yeah, Jenni's going to thank all the wonderful people.
Okay, so, well, thank you to our co-presenters, Amy and Eric, for rounding out this talk. And thank you to Jeremiah and Zach and the entire team at Essentia Health for sponsoring this conference and making it happen. It's really been an honor to come to Minnesota, to come back to Minnesota for me. And we hope we've shared some healing information today, but also in a way that maybe will make it a little bit more fun. Thanks.
All right. Let's give our presenters a big hand. I think they did a great job today. Now, we do have our Q&A session left. We're going to do that and go through your questions quickly. We're going to take like a really fast 5-minute break.